All right, today we're jumping into the story of King David. And you really can't understand him without seeing his life for what it is, a story split perfectly and tragically in two.
His life, especially as we see it in the book of 2 Samuel, is this incredible dramatic arc. You have this spectacular rise to power, followed by a devastating fall that was entirely his own fault. So what was it? What's the one thing that could take a legendary king and just snap his reign in half? Well, before we can get to the fall, you have to appreciate just how high he climbed in the first place.
Now, this first part of David's story, it's like a masterclass in leadership. But his success was built on this one core principle that made him completely different from the king who came before him. I mean, just look at the contrast with his predecessor, King Saul. The difference is night and day. Saul was the people's choice, sure, but he disobeyed God and was rejected. David, on the other hand, was God's choice, and his entire early success came from the fact that he respected God's authority and completely depended on him. And that dependence really paid off. I mean, David didn't just stumble into this. He was smart. He won over his own tribe first. Then he made peace with his enemies. He captured Jerusalem, a brilliant strategic move to be his capital city. And then he finally took down the Philistines, Israel's oldest rival. He literally pulled a divided nation together. So, picture this. David is at the absolute peak of his success. The kingdom is secure, his enemies are defeated, everything is going right. And it's right at this moment that God gives him a promise that will echo through all of history. This is what's known as the Davidic Covenant. And get this, it was completely unconditional. God promised to make David's name great, give Israel a secure home, and peace from their enemies. But the biggest thing, an everlasting dynasty. The idea that his royal line, his kingdom, would last forever, that becomes one of the most important threads in the entire biblical story. So let's just pause and be really clear about where David is at this point. He has everything. He's the chosen king. He has an unbreakable promise from God. He's ruling a united, peaceful kingdom. He is at the absolute summit. And you know how it goes. The higher you climb, the farther you have to fall. Because it's from this incredible peak that David's life just completely plummets. This is the pivot point. This is where the story breaks in two. And it all started so simply. He was supposed to be at war, leading his army, but he stayed home. And that one choice, it set off a chain reaction. He sees Bathsheba, which leads to adultery. That leads to a desperate cover-up, which ends in the calculated murder of her husband, Uriah, one of his most loyal and decorated soldiers. And this is so much more than just a personal moral failure. This was a deep, profound abuse of the very power God had given him. The king, who was supposed to be a shepherd protecting his people, used his authority to become a wolf. He turned God's blessing into a weapon for his own gratification.
So the prophet Nathan, bravely I might add, confronts David, and to David's credit, he completely breaks down and repents. God forgives him, but, and this is the crucial part, that forgiveness did not erase the consequences. The seeds he sowed were about to grow into a very bitter harvest, right inside his own house.
And you can just see the poison spreading. The exact sins David committed, lust, deception, murder, they're mirrored almost perfectly in his own children. His son Amnon rapes his half-sister Tamar. Then, in revenge, her brother Absalom murders Amnon. The dysfunction just cascaded down through the family. And this wasn't some quick, tragic event. We're talking about a slow burn over 15 years where David's household completely imploded. The fallout from his one act of sin leads directly to incest, revenge killing, and eventually, a full-blown civil war led by his own son Absalom, forcing David to flee his own capital in shame. So this raises a massive question, right? King Saul also sinned, and he lost his kingdom for it. David commits adultery and murder, yet he's forgiven. So what's the difference? Why him and not Saul? It really all comes down to one thing, repentance. When Saul was confronted, he made excuses. He tried to justify himself. He tried to hold on to his power. But when David was confronted by the prophet Nathan, his response was immediate and total. He just said, "I have sinned." He humbled himself completely, and it was in that brokenness that he found forgiveness. And this statement from Nathan, this is the key to the whole second half of David's life. It holds two things in perfect tension. First, the Lord has taken away your sin. That is pure grace. But then, the sword will never depart from your house. Those are earthly consequences. He is forgiven, yes, but the fallout is not going away. So,
In the end, this isn't a story about a perfect king, not even close. It's about a profoundly broken one. And it really forces us to rethink what grace is. It's not a magic wand that makes our mistakes disappear. It's the strength God gives you to walk through the wreckage that you yourself have created.
The two halves of David's life really leave us wrestling with this powerful question. His story shows us that forgiveness and suffering can, and often do, coexist. And maybe that's the point. Grace isn't an escape from reality, but the power you need to face it.